Hey everyone. This isn't on. This is on. Thank you everybody for having me today. I want to echo the way that Alan started his presentation just by saying, just because I'm up on stage doesn't mean that I think that I have anything to share that's any more valuable than anyone in this audience. I am a bit of an interlocutor between lots of different groups of people, lots of different people with lots of different philosophies and ideologies, and I think maybe that's why I was asked to be here today, and I'm honored to be here. I do want to acknowledge before I move on that everybody feels at home in a certain space and everyone feels discounted in other spaces. I want to acknowledge that my presentation is going to be about a lot of different things. We're going to touch on beginning farmer issues. We're going to touch on the premise of the fact that every acre counts when we're talking about our land ethic and about our goals around ecology and climate. But I want everyone to know that I respect you and I count each and every one of you in this space, and that I hope that at the end of my presentation will feel counted in other spaces and will feel excited and interested to invite people into ours. My name is Harrison Topp. I work for an organization called the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. We are a grassroots organization. We were founded in Colorado in 1907. We were founded on a national level in 1902. We have been singing since the inception of our organization. For that reason, I wanted to start today with a group song. And I'm going to invite my friend Dan up here to sing with me, please. Salida, Colorado, and King County. You also know the man with the most beautiful voice that I know. So he's going to join me. The way I want to do this is he and I are going to sing a verse together, and then we're going to turn it over, and I want everyone to sing that verse with us. And then we're going to go to the next verse, and we're going to do it that way too. And if you're singing along with us while we're singing along, well, you just couldn't help it. But we are going to sing every verse twice. And the goal is that we're leading the first one, and then you guys are coming in. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because I really like the verses, and I want you to read them. And I think sometimes if you're trying to read and sing and feel totally embarrassed at the same time, it helps to be able to go through them twice. So this song's called Seed for Tomorrow. I found it in one of our organizational songbooks called The Singing Farmers, which was published in 1947 by the National Farmers Union. Are you ready? Yeah. So it's called Seed for Tomorrow.
Dig your hand in the land and listen to my story. Feel the cotton, wheat, and corn, the riches and the glory. Feel the sweat and strain of those who work before me. Dig your hands down in the land. All right, everybody. Dig your hand in the land and listen to my story. Feel the cotton, wheat, and corn, the riches and the glory. Feel the sweat and strain of those who work before me. Dig your hands down in the land.
Will you pause for a second, Dan? All right, everyone just make the loudest noise you can really quick. Everyone. That's how I want you to sing! All right? This is the next verse.
Let's step it up.
Alright.
Dig your hand in the land and touch the toil and sorrow in the soil where the greenbacks never grow on what I borrow. Dig down and tell me where's seed for tomorrow. Dig your hands down in the land. Oh, there you go. Dig your hand in the land. Touch the toil and sorrow in the soil where the greenbacks never grow on what I borrow. Dig down and tell where's my seed for tomorrow. Dig your hands down in the land. Dig your hand in the land. There's gonna be a meeting for 1,000,000 hands across this land. Be no more weeping, sow the seed today. Tomorrow do the reaping, dig your hand down in the land.
All right, everybody.
Dig your hand in the land. There's gonna be a meeting for 1,000,000 hands across the land. Be no more weeping, sow the seed today. Tomorrow do the reaping, dig your hand down in the land. Dig your hand in the land. Keep your eyes on new horizon. Dig your hand in the land. There's a new sun arising. Shine on that seed to help us organize and keep your hands down in the land. All right, everyone, really belt it out for this one. Dig your hand in the land. Keep your eyes on new horizon. Dig your hand in the land. There's a new sun arising. Shine on that seed to help us organize and keep your hands down in the land. And keep our hands down in the land.
Dan will be back in a little bit. Thank you so much, everybody, for singing with me. I don't have a PowerPoint, so this is just a backdrop slide. It's from our national, what we now call fly-in, but this was back in the day when they called it a drive-in, when they all loaded up on a bus in Denver outside the Capitol and drove to Washington, D.C. So I'm just going to leave that up there as a backdrop for now. I have a script that I'm going to follow. Kind of. So if I trail off, I hope that's okay. And if I have to pause and find myself in my script again, I hope that's okay too. I mean, I'm like the hottest thing going in agriculture right now. I'm young-ish. I'm an organic farmer. I'm a white guy with kind of a beard thing. I think there's a lot of people that see people like me and people like my peers as playing a real major role in the future of agriculture. That we have some opportunity to embrace change, and some opportunity to innovate, some opportunity to bring something really cool to what's happening. But it's also possible I'm just stuck in a positive feedback loop. We're here at the Radical Center, and I know this isn't exactly I'm going to elaborate, and I know it's not exactly the definition of the Radical Center that we're built on. But there's this thing I've been thinking about a lot recently, that if I'm going to be in the center, if I'm going to be in the Radical Center, I should be able to look to my left and see about 450 million acres, about 1.6 million farmers that are just the most eco-freaking farmers I could possibly imagine. 18% organic matter, just the most. And then I should be able to look to the other side and the other 50% of the acreage and farmers in this country, they're all just a bunch of nozzle heads just spraying the snot out of the weeds on their farms. But the truth is that's not where the center is. Alan Williams brought up, I don't think he did it today, but he did it in an earlier presentation, brings up the fact that there's about 5% of the farmers in this country that use advanced soil health practices. 5%. So this is the center of the stage, and this is where I want to be. If we're using the metric of soil health, this is we're like over here. We're like I don't know how far I can get over, but this is this is where we are in our conversation in agriculture as a whole, and I don't think that's entirely true because there's another guy out there. Well, there was. His name was Mark Twain, who said there are lies, there are damned lies, and then there are statistics. So we're going to try to not talk a whole lot about numbers. I'm going to talk a little bit about where I see things on the ground as a farmer and as an organizer. I work for an organization called Farmers Union. I've said that before. I also run a family orchard in Paonia, Colorado, which is a little town in Delta County, Colorado. That's basically it. I also eat ice cream once in a while, and I managed to watch Stranger Things season 2. A little bit about my background. I didn't grow up farming. I'm a first-generation grower. I went to college in New York City, studied film and television production. From there, I moved to a small town in western North Carolina called Marshall, North Carolina, where we, filmmaking partner and I, decided that we were going to make a film about folk hero Bascom Lamar Lunsford. Bascom Lamar Lunsford, though he has passed, to this day has the most number of songs recorded from memory in the Library of Congress. He's a really neat guy. And Bascom Lamar Lunsford is one of these guys. He was just obsessed with music and dance culture in southern Appalachian Mountains, and he would like get a job selling apple trees, and he'd like go from farm to farm, and he wouldn't sell any apple trees, he just learned songs from the people he was staying with, and so he amassed this amazing amount of knowledge and went through a lot of jobs because he couldn't keep them. So we thought, like, in order to make this unauthorized biofilm about Bascom, that we would sort of follow in his footsteps, and we decided we'd start living on farms and we'd start working with people in that area. And if you've ever been in the southern Appalachian Mountains, there's a lot of sort of interesting anachronisms, places where things where history is still really alive, especially in the music and dance culture. And so we started working on farms, and we got set up in a tar paper shack on a sugar farm, and we made molasses for a while. And in our spare time, we would try to go work on other farms and learn what we could. So we would, weed at a market vegetable garden. We would spend years milking at an artisan dairy, and we worked for Buster Norton, and Buster Norton grew tobacco. And to this day, Buster Norton has the best quote that I have yet to hear in agriculture, which is, "The darn barn broke." We were hanging tobacco in this barn, and the barn rent in half. The darn barn broke. We eventually completed the film, but farming took hold of me. It was the thing that I wanted to continue doing, and in order to do that, I found a lady who knew more about farming than I did, and we started hugging and kissing, and eventually leased some land together. And she, I really attribute a lot of what I know to her. She was a brilliant person. Unfortunately, the entire way we just lost money, just hemorrhaged money, and that, and as well as other things, eventually rent us asunder. I decided that I was going to swear off agriculture completely. I tried really, really, really hard. I thought I'd do anything. I'd go back to grad school, I'd become a teacher, I'd become a nun, whatever it took. But it didn't work. I found my way to a small town in southern Colorado, southwest Colorado, called Cortez, Mancos, where I became a school garden coordinator with the AmeriCorps program. Can you hear me? Thanks. All right. And this is intentional buzz marketing for AmeriCorps. If you're a young person, unsure of where to go in life, just do AmeriCorps. It's the best decision you'll make. But it was here that a few things happened in Mancos. One was I rekindled my love of agriculture. The other was I found my first true love, which was the ag organization, and not my first true love with the ag organization was the Grange. I became a volunteer organizer with the Mount Lookout Grange. I was the lecturer was my title, and it only happened because the Grange was about to go out of existence in our area. Raise your hand if you're familiar with Granges. All right, if your hand's down, get with it. Granges are amazing. I mean, honestly, like my whole presentation today is like really great, but like if you were just a member of a Grange or an ag organization, you wouldn't need to listen to hear me speak. So Granges are amazing. Ours was about to go out of existence. There was I happened to live with sort of the town matriarch at the time, and so she was the one that she was this older woman, wonderful woman named Betsy Harrison. And she happened to get the call that said, well, the Grange is going out. No one's using it, and we're going to sell the building if no one else wants to keep the Grange going. So Betsy said, Harrison, have you ever heard of Granges? And I said, hell yeah, Betsy, I've heard of Granges, because I'm a little bit of a nerd about labor movements and the things of our past, and the ways that they really do pertain to us today. And so Betsy and I, we got together, and we and a couple of other older folks made up the first board of the renewed Mount Lookout Grange. And the whole point was that we were going to create a space where anyone felt comfortable. Regardless of where you fell in society, you were going to feel comfortable at the Grange. If you were riding Genghis Khan, you were going to feel comfortable at the Grange. If you wore flowers in the hair, you were going to feel comfortable at the Grange. That was our goal. And we basically succeeded. By the time that we were done, we took a building that had just about been abandoned, and we were having community dinners that were literally flooding out into the streets because we couldn't keep it contained in the Grange. Today, that Grange continues to thrive, has a commercial kitchen, is doing a lot of good work for the community. And from that, from that work with the Grange, I got recruited to work for Farmers Union. I'd never heard of Farmers Union before, but I thought it sounded pretty cool. And it's true, the Farmers Union and the Grange have a lot that go back in history together. And this is my big plug. Again, I'll say it again, a lot of what I'm saying today exists today in ag organizations. Whether we're talking about Farmers Union, whether we're talking about Grange, whether we're talking about National Young Farmers Coalition, whether we're talking about Farm Bureau, Cattlemen's, or any of the others, I want to encourage everybody to be very, very, very active in their organizations. Quivira quote, oh God, Quivira. Be really active, in your ag organizations, because these are the places that we're having some of the most interesting conversations, some of the most compassionate and I think relevant debates. This is one of those moments where I go back to my script. During this time is also when I got back into farming for myself. I'm going to be oscillating back and forth between what it means to be this interlocutor amongst all these communities and what it means to be a beginning farmer today. I took over management of my family's orchard. My family, when I moved away to college, my family bought a pretty small orchard in Paonia. The idea was that I was leaving, my brother was leaving, and there was no real tangible space left. My parents felt that we could all convene as a family. And all of our values really extended into agriculture. So they thought, well, we'll get this small farm, and maybe this will be a place that we all come back together. They didn't know anything about farming. And it turned out that was a real challenge for a while. But right about the time that I started working with Farmers Union, I also took over management and started leasing the farm for my folks. 15 acres in today's modern orcharding world is a tough amount of acreage to make it go on. My partner and I are trying to expand that orchard, which is kind of interesting because there's not because I don't know if there's more generations of orcharding in my area, in my region. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. But we're seeing a major deficit in the number of people coming into orcharding, and I think I have a lot of reasons for that I'll get into later. But one of it is, and one of the things that I've really struggled with is that I came into agriculture as a real ideologue. I read Omnivore's Dilemma, and I knew exactly, I had it all figured out. Big ag was bad. Small ag was really good. And I think, unfortunately, there's still a lot of people that think that way. I had the really unfortunate opportunity to talk to a dear friend of mine last night as I was getting ready for this presentation. A dear friend that is the president of the local Cattlemen's and Livestock Association in my county. He's an amazing rancher. His name's Nate Adams. He does pool ranching up on National Wilderness. They're extremely holistic minded. They do a lot of really, really progressive stuff, especially on public lands. They still cowboy up on the mountains. He spends all summer long doing nothing but cowboying his horses up in the highlands. And And he called me, and we're redoing our master plan in Delta County. And this is the plan that's hopefully going to sort of make a roadmap for us moving forward. And we were at a meeting where half the people in the room, over half the people in the room, were just shouting Nate down. We're just saying that the kind of ag that he was doing wasn't agriculture, and that agriculture in our county should be defined. That we should create boundaries and designations about how we define this agriculture. And Nate called me just so shaken up, and he said, "Harrison, what's going on? This was an organic farm organization. Why are they fighting me? I don't want to be fighting with other ag organizations." I said, "Well, Nate, I'm really sorry to hear that. And now I need to make a bunch of phone calls and see what the heck was going on last night, because that's not the way it's supposed to be." But it's the way that I think a lot of us still think. And I don't know about a lot of people in this room, but we think a lot about how, again, this big one kind of farming is bad and this other kind of farming is good. And I would posit that that really works against us. I'm glad that Alan went before me and he talked about all this ecological damage that's been happening, all of these issues that have been happening. And as a person who's involved deeply in agriculture, I want to say there's a lot of people out there that aren't in this room right now that should be coming to the Radical Center, that we should be creating a space for at the Radical Center. And they're not here because they're big farmers and they're bad. They're here because maybe they're struggling with change. Maybe they live under a mountain of debt, and that debt is really hard to get out from, and it's really hard to change the ways they do things because of it. For myself, and I think maybe it's coming through, I'll just let everyone know, I'll just come out and say it so that if you're up here and you're looking at me and thinking, I know who he is, I'll just confirm what you think. I'm a self-loathing liberal. I'm not a market farmer. I'm not a commodity grower. I'm somewhere in between. I farm organically, but I kind of hate that too, because organic was sort of founded on this principle of, well, these people are better than everyone else. And that's something that I really struggle with. Because the thing is, the largest swaths of our land base in agriculture, the greatest opportunities we have to sequester carbon, to combat climate change, they're owned by people that probably aren't in this room. I mean, many of you are. And thank you very much for being here. And many of you who are striving to be or aspire to be are. But there's a huge amount of people that aren't here. In many ways, the organic industry, the regenerative agriculture community, has really intentionally created rifts with these farmers, with these people that control the land that has the greatest opportunity to combat climate change and achieve our ecological goals. I mean, just like I said, take organic. Regardless of what your beliefs are about the benefits. Organic took a wedge and it shoved it down in agriculture. And many of us, I bought into it gleefully. I didn't realize that I was basically waging this vociferous McCarthyism-style warfare on all these people. It's really problematic. Farmers and ranchers, they're basically the engines for democracy in the majority of our country's land. However, we're seeing larger and larger and larger tracts of land being managed by fewer and fewer people. And that really undermines that democracy. Though we see a rise in local foods, and to some degree we're seeing a rise in young and beginning farmers, there is no doubt that we are seeing a precipitous drop in the number of people inhabiting our rural and agricultural areas. Maybe it's because I'm a farmer organizer and I do I spend a lot of time driving through back roads, driving on country roads, that I see a lot of towns that are just frankly dying. I see the fact, and I think it's an issue, that in many places, not necessarily our peri-urban areas or our areas like where I live, which is kind of up and coming, but a lot of places we're losing our grip on our natural, our pseudo-natural, and our agricultural areas. And maybe this would be okay if we were returning these places to a natural state, but we're really not. In many cases, they're left degraded, or these lands are managed by larger and larger and larger consolidated interests. The problem is, we no longer have people on the ground that are impacted by rural issues. So essentially, we're defecting from democracy. We're affecting from this democracy of stewardship. And I think we're defecting even further by ostracizing and creating hierarchies in agriculture. Because every acre counts in agriculture. That's the point of when we're trying to achieve our ecological goals. When we're trying to, and that's loaded language too, because a lot of people wouldn't say that they farm because of ecological goals. But the point is that they really matter, and the acres that they manage really matters. And I know here at the Radical Center, we're trying to buffer a lot of these intense ideologies a little, so that people can come in and be a part of this conversation. But there's a lot of people I still don't see here that I think should be a part of this conversation. And I think in many ways it's up to Quivira, it's up to the other organizations, but it's also up to all of us to make this a space where people feel like they can come and they can feel counted. And I know many of you have probably been in spaces where you don't feel counted, spaces that we often think of as these traditional or conventional agriculture spaces. But the truth is, and that's hard too. Or if you don't feel counted because of your gender, or if you don't feel counted because of your race, or if you don't feel counted because you're a small farmer, or a young farmer, or an organic farmer, or a holistic rancher, you haven't felt counted in spaces too. But I don't think that's any excuse to make the spaces that you inhabit ostracize other people. So a little bit back to me. In my spare time, I like to call square dances. I get to do it for work because it counts as rural rehabilitation. My partner Station and I are doing everything we can to establish ourselves as agrarians in this industry. In my area, I've joined the local horticulture society board. I'm very active in a number of farm organizations. I've also taken on a role trying to make sure that we're preserving the infrastructure that goes into orchard agriculture in our area. And despite orchard agriculture being like the sexiest kind of farming there is, it's really, in my area, really struggling. And I don't think it's struggling for economic reasons. Orchards are slowly turning into venues for weddings and into permaculture sanctuaries. And I'm really confused because I feel like, why aren't there more young people coming into orcharding? Really, there's really endless paid opportunities to work and to learn the industry. There's still land available. It's not like super cheap, but you can still do it. It helps to have a little bit of off-farm income for the first few years. But you can get in and you can buy in. It's a real head-scratching for me. I think something holding a lot of young and beginning farmers back is that it's a big leap from the direct market world. This is another point to get involved in your organization, get involved knowing people, because there's a lot of these opportunities out there. There's tons of opportunities in agriculture right now. And in orcharding is just one, and I see it. I also think there's an issue because the older generation isn't necessarily putting the work in to be bringing in the rising generation. I also don't think the younger generation is necessarily doing the work to create the bonds that they need to with the older generation. The truth is that both are just stubborn. No way. Yahweh. And it's really hard to get the notion into their heads that they need to do something as gross as cooperate. I'm also fairly convinced that we just don't fit the model that a lot of aspiring, young farmers are looking for. We use a lot of equipment, we spray, we have labor management issues. But I have to say, I grew up I got into agriculture doing market vegetables and all these other things. But this is the first time I feel like I'm really a part of agriculture. I feel like I'm really a part of a food system. you know, recently we sent, for the first time in my life, we sent some pallets of cherries down to Texas. I had only ever been in markets where I really knew the people that were buying my stuff. I really knew I had sort of this curated market base. And so when I finally got stuff on a pallet, sending it down to Texas, I was amazed because I was suddenly just like putting this like fungible like nutrient unit into the system, right? And suddenly I realized that there was all these people out there that were eating this fungible nutrient unit that I didn't know. And I had this aha moment about what it means to be a part of a food system. And I looked around at everyone that made sure that I was a part of that system. You know, our packing shed, which everyone loves to hate on. And my neighbors that lent me the equipment and the labor we call in our area we call labor agricultural athletes because they are the most skilled people. And I looked at these agricultural athletes and I recognized what a system that was a part of. And I finally realized that like my whole want to be this independent sort of Jeffersonian farmer was, in my opinion, was sort of, I was turning back on that idea. I really was not interested in that anymore because I was now a part of this larger system. Because I was trying to purvey food to a society which was asking me for it. Not just the people that happen to be educated enough to know that they should spend abhorrent amounts of money on it. And I think that's a real challenge. You know, there's a lot of people that, farmers and ranchers are kind of this very base resource in our society. I think we all know that like nothing would happen without food. And that, you know, I think there's a lot of people, some of these bespoke farmers, these, you know, I don't want to just say small scale, but, you know, people who have created this more artisan product or bespoke product that feel like they've maybe moved up the ranks. Maybe they're not quite that low, you know, the bottom anymore. But it's really important in many ways because food is really fundamental and foundational to our entire society. You know, it was said earlier that our ethic has to do with you know, what we do to protect the most vulnerable people, and or not just people, the things that are most vulnerable. And in my life, for me personally, many of the most vulnerable people are the people that don't have access to the food that I grow, that don't have access to your grass-fed beef, that don't have access to the farmer's market. And it's not just because of like these systemic issues. It's like some people don't have access to that because like honestly that's just not what they're into. And that's fine too, but those people should be healthy also. Because again, I took this pledge to be the foundation of society. I'm at the bottom of a ladder that only has one rung. And I think that's this really interesting idea because like every group that's at the bottom, we often like decide that we should just like fight amongst each other. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening in agriculture right now. We have these rifts, we have these you know, sort of stone throwing matches at one another. And I think everyone thinks that the other side threw the first stone. But to Alan's, I'm so glad Alan went before me. I mean, all of this stuff, like if we're just hating on these people that like we see as degrading agriculture, like all you're doing is pushing people to degrade land even more, you know, if we're not inviting them to be part of our conversations. And I think there's a part of it which is about compromising ourselves too, to be able to talk to them, to be able to communicate with them. And this is not just in agriculture. I think we all know that we live in an incredibly polarized country, and that this is a challenge that we all have. But I'm really pleased. I'm really proud to be the second speaker today, and to say to everybody, like, throughout the course of this conference, I know all of you are probably going to be leaving tomorrow and coming up to the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union convention in Denver. That's where I'm going to be. But you know, for many of you, I'd like you to encourage everyone to go through this conference to learn a lot, to be gaining a lot of really important knowledge, but also to not be creating rigid dogmas, because I think that's not the way that we need to go out into this world. And I'm especially speaking to beginning farmers and young farmers in this room. As you go out, as you go back into your worlds, I think it's really important to be really opening your arms and really being a sponge for lots of agriculture. Like I said, there's lots of opportunities in there. you know, whether it's orcharding, whether it's ranching, whether there's sweet corn, you know, there's lots of industries that need new people thinking with new ways and ways that we can really, I believe, truly impact and try to achieve a lot of our ecological goals. We're gonna sing another song. This song is written by the Reverend Johnson Oatman and A.C. Neese. It's from the Farmers Union Hymnal, which was published in 1908. It's a little funny. The song is a little funny. But we're gonna sing it. We'll do the same thing. We'll sing a verse, and then everyone else sings with us. We're not gonna sing with guitar this time. All right.
The time is approaching when kingdoms shall fall, when kings from their thrones shall be hurled. But ever a monarch high over them all, the farmer is king of the world.
All right, everybody.
The time is approaching when kingdoms shall fall, when kings from their thrones shall be hurled. But ever a monarch high over them all, the farmer is king of the world. The nations may fight for a place or a name, wherever their flags are unfurled. But over them all, though unknown to fame, the farmer is king of the world. The nations may fight for a place or a name, wherever their flags are unfurled. But over them all, though unknown to fame, the farmer is king of the world. Hurrah for the banner that stands for the farm, on high let its folds be unfurled. Proclaiming wherever it floats on the breeze, the farmer is king of the world. Hurrah for the banner that stands for the farm, on high let its folds be unfurled. Proclaiming wherever it floats on the breeze, the farmer is king of the world. The trail of the monarchs over land and over sea, like some mighty serpents are curled. But fearing them not, for greater is she, the farmer is king of the world. The trail of monarchs o'er land and o'er sea, like some mighty serpents are curled. But fearing them not, for greater is she, the farmer is king of the world. Hurrah for King Farmer, may her kingdom stand, till stars from their orbit are hurled. For while other monarchs divide up the land, the farmer is king of the world. Hurrah for King Farmer, may her kingdom stand, till stars from their orbit are hurled. For while other monarchs divide up the land, the farmer is king of the world. Hurrah for the banner that stands for the farm, on high let its folds be unfurled. Proclaiming wherever it floats on the breeze, the farmer is king of the world.
Shout it out, everybody.
Hurrah for the banner that stands for the farm, on high let its folds be unfurled. Proclaiming wherever it floats on the breeze, the farmer is king of the world.